There are a great many reasons to get a laser for your woodworking workshop. To make woodworking videos based on laser projects, however, is not one of them. Take a look at this fella. Does he look like he's enjoying himself? Sitting there watching a focused beam of light bringing to life a highly weird, geeky and personal project that no one else will care about? Nope. You know what the best bit is? This is the interesting part. Because for several hours beforehand, he was tapping away on a keyboard and clicking on a mouse, working with the CAD software to design this project. Honestly, that was more than half the work. So if he's falling asleep, then how the heck is an audience who has no vested interest in what the pew 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 machine will spit out going to sit through a video on the project? Laser videos are boring. Now, the great irony is, as maker of said obscure, nerdy personal project, I'm actually having the time of my freaking life. This project is literally why I started woodworking a bit over 6 years ago, and it's only now, with the help of this awesome bit of new tech, that I can fulfill that dream. You see, before woodworking, my main hobby was geocaching, using GPS coordinates to find real treasure boxes hidden all over the world. Look it up, it's great fun. Can't wait till my bubba girl is old enough to come play with her daddy. I was so into it, in fact, that I was president of the Geocaching New South Wales Association for 5 years, and one of the things that we did annually was mint a unique geocoin. These cool little collectibles right here, each with a different iconic location from around our great state, printed on the back of them. I have every one going back to 2009. And 6 years ago, I wanted to start woodworking so I could make a display for them and stop them from living in this tin. I had exactly what I wanted in mind. A bit of wood in the shape of the state of New South Wales with little pockets cut in it for the coins to sit in. How hard could it be? But the odd shape of the coins gave me pause as I had literally no woodworking tools or experience, so I made this instead. A giant path tag coin holder, also a geocaching thing, in the shape of Australia as a practice run, I told myself. This was far easier as all the little coins were the same size, they were round, and they're magnetic, which the geocoins are not. But the stress of this build nearly killed me as a newbie, so I put the trickier geocoin holder on the back burner for a while. A few years later, I was using this experience to sell smaller path tag holders at a big geocaching event, and again, I thought of my unfinished plans. By now, however, I had discovered resin, and had some serious scope creep when it came to my geocoin holder ambitions. Notice how the geocoins are basically a paint-by-numbers design, with individual pockets of colour? Now I wanted my GC New South Wales coin holder to look like a giant version of the GC New South Wales geocoin. I wanted to carve out the front of it and fill it with pretty coloured goo with the coins mounted on the back. I even practiced this technique with a giant version of the Mega Events geocoin for the organisers to give away, and it looked super cool. But again, that build taught me that hand routing all those little New South Wales shaped pockets for the coins to sit in, that need to be a press fit as the coins aren't magnetic, and carving out the more intricate design of the GC New South Wales geocoin on the face, compared to this practice piece, relegated the idea firmly back into the one-day pile. Then, last year, Xtool reached out with an offer to work together, and finally, I had the device I needed to make this now 6-year-old project idea a reality. Now, I've been aware of and knocked back many lasers as my YouTube channel grew and people started offering them to me, so if you want to know why I finally said yes to the Xtool S1 and what it can do, I'll link my previous video on the topic. I'm not going to go into that today. This is not a sales pitch for the 40-watt S1, though it is an awesome piece of kit, and there are affiliate links below. Thank you for those who have used them already. For this project, I'm using 3mm ply that a much more budget-friendly and less powerful machine could easily handle. But simply finally having a laser in the workshop gave me the confidence not only to just get started on this project, but also that with its carving capabilities, I could make it to a standard that previously would have been unheard of trying to do it by hand. On top of that, if it went well, with all the design work done, which I actually quite enjoy, it's just terribly boring to watch on a video, see line 1 of this script, I could potentially make more copies of it relatively easily for my friends in the GC New South Wales Association. So that is what we're making and why we're making it. It may still not make much sense to you, but hey, this is for me. Go on, spoil yourself. Make that project that no one else is interested in because it's something that you really want. You have my permission. And now that lame attempt at keeping this rather boring laser video interesting is complete, Let's go back and see what it would be like without all the fun background information. You've already had quite a few sneak peeks of what this project is, but we are going to jump back to the start and very quickly go over how I'm putting this thing together. So we're looking at 4 pieces of wood basically, a front and a back clamshell which are going to get stuck together, one of them which is the resin-filled GC New South Wales logo, and the back which is going to hold all of the coins. The walnut plywood is tricky to engrave because it is quite dark, but it ended up coming out quite nicely. And now we have one of the really good reasons to buy a laser. You see, even though these geocoins should all be exactly the same size, because they've been made over the process of 10 years on different machines by different companies, they are not. So you can see here that some were really loose in the holes and some were really tight when I cut them to the reported dimension. And I ended up having to go with 3 different sizes in order to get that press fit that I wanted so that they would stay put once this was all assembled. Then I decided to try some marquetry. So I've got the walnut background, the basswood foreground on the 3mm ply, and I carved out a personalised name. That's my geocaching name, Zalgariath. But of course, when you cut out the letters, you can't just reinsert them because they're slightly too small due to the kerf of a laser. I believe the X-Tool S1's kerf at 40 watt is 0.1 of a millimeter. But fortunately, it has this lovely little offset feature that you can put on and recut on a new piece of plywood, which will compensate for that kerf and make your pieces fit snugly instead of loose and rattling around. In theory anyway. Put simply, for this experiment, while the letters themselves worked really well, I was very happy, the font was just too small for doing this. Even with tweezers and a lot of swearing, I couldn't get the tiny little bits of the A's and the E's and the other small fine details back in again at the end. On the bigger letters later on, it worked like a charm. So there's 2 reasons to have a laser. Imagine trying to cut these tiny little bugger things by hand. And here is reason 3, sheer accuracy. Reason 4, speed. Imagine doing this with a router and just your eye and hands to guide you. Not to mention being able to press a button and do it over and over again if I ever wanted to mass produce these for sale. Yes, it took quite a bit of CAD work to clean up the original images, which were not in vectors, but I'm learning how to deal with those lovely mathematical lines, and the results are pretty spectacular. Ooh, that's the most complex cut I've done. Even more so, it gave me other ideas. All those little off-cut bits I really want that thin outline for filling up with resin were not going to be wasted. I could instead glue those down onto another piece of wood and basically turn this into a 2-for-1 project, but that's for another day. So now I had my main pieces cut out, I decided to do something else which I'd probably do differently next time, and that's use superglue to attach the slots to the walnut back piece, with the years engraved into it. Superglue was fine, I did get a tiny bit of squeeze out, but this was only the start of my nightmares. Superglue did work well, however, for my little marquetry letters, when I could get them to fit. As we said, we struggled to fill in the rest, but they ultimately came out quite nicely. I could have even made them perhaps a tiny bit smaller with the kerf adjustment. Get in there, you little bugger. Thwack-a-tapperoo. Oh, that's satisfying. With a laser, you can cut incredibly small pieces. This was my attempt to recut the infill pieces for these small letters, which again would be literally impossible. I failed, but only just. I think a few points size larger in font, and this would have worked. The O's were okay, but the finer details, yeah, no, they weren't going to go. Supergluing this piece down with all its really fine details was a nightmare. I should have been more patient, used wood glue that would dry clear, and give myself a bit more time. But as we said, we could use the off-cut bits to reposition the inside bits of the letters, and that was a much better scale to be attempting that type of work with. We are of course going to resin this, but beforehand I sprayed it with far too much satin polyurethane to try and seal up all of the gaps and stop any resin bleed. Using my favourite rice trick to estimate the amount of resin we would need, turned out to be a surprisingly large amount. There's about 150 millilitres going into that, which should be fine. I have that much resin lying around. Let me just set up the scale here and go to my resin box to find something of a disaster.
Well, this is putting a damper on plans. Went to the resin box. And tip for new players, don't leave your hardener on its side. Granted, it was probably beyond its best by date anyway, but shit. I don't think I'm doing any resining today.
After throwing it in the bin, I fished it out again because I thought, no, surely there is going to be enough here. Now, this was bloody risky. You can tell by the colour of that hardener that this resin is way past its use-by date. As in, it's 4 or 5 years old, and it should only be on the shelf for 12 months after you open it. But everything was going to be colour. I didn't worry if it wasn't going to be clear. And I really couldn't be bothered trying to buy more resin to get this project done. Will this come back to bite me in the butt? You're about to find out. Only 3 colours really needed here because they're green in 2 tones, red in 2 tones, and blue in 2 tones. So I just started off with a smaller amount of pigment mixed in, and I could adjust it with black and white pigments as well to get that pinky colour as opposed to the red colour, and the deep green as opposed to the leaf green, and slowly underfill everything. This is plywood, and very, very thin veneered at that. I am not going to do any sanding over the top, so I had to make sure that the resin actually was less than what each of those little gaps could take. This saves a lot of work later on. And then I hit a problem.
Hot, 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 hot.
The really old resin started to cure. And by cure, I mean go off bloody hot, bloody quickly. And that blue stuff you see poured on there was going solid even before it came out of the little receptacle.
Alright, all I can do I think is mix up some more and try and finish this off with this shit resin. Alright, made a new batch. Not as happy with the colour, but that's what we got.
Worked very, very quickly and just managed to get everything done. So, unless you like playing this risky game, chuck out that old resin and get yourself some new stuff.
Alright, so that'll have to do.
I was very lucky to get away with this. Pop the bubbles with the old heat gun, and it cured nice and hard and relatively clear. And then just leave all these silicone things to dry. It's great firstly not only for cleanup, it's very satisfying to pull out the resin blocks from the silicone containers, but also it tells you whether or not you've been successful. If it's cured in the container, it's cured in your project. Thank you, Perfect Cast. You did well, but it is time to say goodbye. And here you can see that underfill with that 3D texture, and that's actually quite nice because this is exactly how the Geo coins themselves are made, and they have that little bit of a dip in each of the colour pools. So it's even more authentic and a lot less work. Wait for it, wait for it. Yeah! Instantly clean tools. Silicone. Links below, my store, yada yada, all that sort of stuff. If you're doing resin work, pick yourself some of these up from Amazon. While I couldn't sand, I could use a little carbide scraper to very, very, very carefully just clean up a few of the tiny drips and drabs which came up onto the top surface. Then it was time to do something which I hadn't actually planned ahead for. I originally was going to hinge these 2 pieces, but they're only 6mm thick and there's not a lot of meat there for screws. So I asked my channel members on my monthly member blog what we should do, and the answer turned out to be magnets, which if I had planned ahead, I could have cut perfect recesses for using the laser early on. But now everything is made. Instead, I had to do some actual woodwork, cut a nice template, which is one of the best things that a laser can do for reason 42 or whatever we're up to of why you should own a laser, and then place that template with the right size holes onto the drill press with the taped on completed clamshell halves, and that would give me the holes that I need to put the magnets in. Oh, this one was a little bit nerve-wracking. Really, really, really didn't want to punch through the front of that. If I'd planned ahead, I would have avoided this step. But then I had the next problem. After squeezing the magnets in, they're very strong little neodymium magnets, but the forces being applied on the front to back are shear forces. In other words, the heavy resin front wants to slide down off the back. And even though I quadruple checked that I had the polarity of all of my magnets correct before inserting them into their forever homes, they simply were not strong enough to overcome these shear forces. Hell, last week we did a chemistry lesson, now we're doing physics. So they were grabbing but just not biting strongly enough. So then I had the bright idea, well, to fight the gravity, we're going to need some pins. The magnets can hold the 2 pieces together. The pins will stop them from sliding off each other when they're hanging on the wall. So I grabbed what I thought were some brass hooks, note to self, cheap bunning stuff, never actually brass, and trimmed them right down to give me 2 little retainer pins which I could sand off and install in the top of the back plate, and they're going to take the weight of the resin front plate as it hangs on the wall. The magnets just stop it from peeling off, basically. Drilled a couple of countersunk holes in the back, and finally everything was snapping together. And we have one giant Geocaching New South Wales geocoin with a hidden secret. I am super chuffed. Last but not least, we pull out the good old Scotty's Custom Grit Step 1 and 2, and like every time I use Scotty's Custom Grit, I start by thinking, this is small enough, I'm just going to apply it by hand, and then 30 seconds later I'm reaching for the orbital sander and my scuffy pads to massage it in. Yes, you can, and in fact should, use this on resin. It brings up an absolutely beautiful shine. Step 2 brings us up to about a bazillion grit, and something new to me is Scotty's Custom Wax. God, this is saying like a wax sales pitch instead of a laser sales pitch. I don't get a commission for this one. It's beautiful stuff anyway. I ran out of my old beeswax tub, so I could finally get into this one, and it brings up an absolutely beautiful shine on that walnut veneer. And that's before I buff it off. Keeping it simple for the wall hanger, just one of these fake brass cheap Bunnings bizzos with the saw teeth on them. Roughly position it with Stabby McStabface to mark out the holes, and then ever so gently, having cut down a few nails very carefully so they do not blow out the front, taparoo in the wall mounting unit. In conclusion, lasers are boring to watch. Laser videos are probably even more boring to watch. But making stuff with lasers that you otherwise couldn't before, that's pretty special. I mean, every new tool in the workshop helps you do new stuff, but a laser or other cutting type device, it's just another level of improvement that a new power tool really can't match that easily. So when it comes to the videos, here's my secret. If you must make a video about a very personal but otherwise boring and nerdy woodworking project that heavily uses the laser as the main tool, because that's where your heart desire takes you, and you may or may not be contractually obliged to knock out a few laser videos for the good folk who have sponsored you recently, voice over all the boring, zappy and fiddly assembly bits with the story, why you were bothering to film this in the first place, and enjoy the process of bringing a long-held dream to life. Because, you know, no one wants to watch a real woodworking channel just make another laser-cut plywood jigsaw puzzle thing that clips together. Right, yes? Well, I just suck.